And a happy Memorial Day weekend to you all out there. This is Pucks from the Pine Tree Pod. I'm your host, Benjamin Kennedy. Thank you so much for joining me again this evening. Today, we are celebrating a little bit of a birthday here. The YouTube channel turns 1 year old today. It was a year ago today. I started this channel. Uh, Hit the record button on the camera for the first time, and here we are. It's been a fun journey. I really have been enjoying this as a hobby, and just thank you all for the support here over the year. It really means a lot. Um, yeah, and in a year's time, we're growing. The channel's in the right direction. In terms of YouTube numbers, it's still small. I think we're just under 1,800 subscribers, but um, we've seen good organic growth here over the past few months in particular. Um, each video is, slowly getting more and more views on YouTube. So absolutely appreciate that from you all out there. And yeah, other hockey fans that in your friends group or family, let them know about me, man. Spread the word here. I'm out here talking hockey, and just again, love all the support that you guys have shown me here over this first year. So going back to my last video, of course, we talked about Don Sweeney and his contract extension and some musings around that. And in that video, we talked a bit about the draft history for the Boston Bruins during Don's tenure. Looked at some numbers, looked at some kind of highlights of some of the better draft picks he's had, and maybe some of the misses and some of the things like that. But it was in that video I said, listen, I need to do more homework on this topic. I had not really done a deep dive into how do the Bruins numbers compare to the rest of the NHL. And just, in all fairness, it's very easy for me to sit here and just take pop shots at Sweeney or the Bruins like so many of us do. But I think due diligence is needed to really take a look at numbers and see how the Bruins have really measured up. So homework is done, and I'm happy to come present it to you guys today, and kind of let you know what I've found out. Um, to really answer this question, how bad has the draft record been under Don Sweeney here for the Boston Bruins? So what we're going to diagnose today, what we're going to look at, and I do apologize, this is going to be a kind of a numbers dump here, so if you want to hit the pause button, go get a cup of coffee. Try to help you through this one. It is a very numbers driven podcast, but we're going to look at NFL or NHL, I'm sorry, draft results from 2015, the year Sweeney was hired, to 2024. I broke down all 32 teams, and I've kind of broken it down by division for the board. It would have been far too cumbersome to have all 32 teams up there and just numbers that you know we would have just gotten lost in them. So I figure break it down by division. We look at a league kind of average and totals, and then we can kind of compare it to where Boston sits. Um, each division is kind of interesting to see the amount of draft picks each division has had. If you go out west to the Pacific, only 489 draft picks. Now, of course, you have Seattle there. It's only had, what, I think 3 years of drafting. So that definitely impacts the number. Of course, Vegas in there hasn't been around for 10 years yet. So, you can definitely see how, some of those numbers will be impacted. Central Division, 553 draft picks, the Metro, 549, and the Atlantic leading the way at 595 draft picks. I guess you can think of, I'm looking right now, Detroit in that time, I think it's at 93 draft picks. I think they have the most. In the league, actually. You have Montreal up there with 86. So, yeah, a couple of teams that have been bad for a while, right? And a lot of draft picks over those years. So, how these break down and the numbers you're looking at up there is looking at the amount of draft picks divided by how many players have played in at least 100 career NHL games, 100 or more. And the second number up there is 200 or more games. So before we dive in, of course, I know kind of my disclaimer is there's other ways that we can measure draft results or draft success. So I don't want to sit here and think this is a be all and end all number, but it is one number or a couple of numbers that we can just use to gauge really where do the Bruins sit when we look at Don Sweeney's peers around the league. So yeah, looking at that Pacific Division, and really when you look at the first number, which is the top number for 100 plus players, it's very, very even across the whole league. Pacific's at 15.9%, Central comes in at 15, Metro 15.4, Atlantic 15.6, and you have a league average of 15.5. So you see quite a bit of consistency, not a lot of real movement there. And you can kind of say the same about 200 plus games, right? Pacific coming in at 10.2%, Central at 10.4, Metro at 10.7, Atlantic down a little bit, 9.2% there. Um, so again, we could sit here and break down each and every team and see some nuance and see some difference in the numbers. But I think what it tells us is that there's a heavy degree of consistency around the league and that every team screws up, right? Every team misses on draft picks. I know we get so tunnel vision and focus into Boston, as we should, I suppose, but it's nice to take a step back and think, okay, we're not alone. We're not the only ones that have missed here in the draft in this time. So yeah, I mean, throughout the league over those 10 years, you've had 2,186 draft picks, and even when you do those numbers, right? I mean, those averages stay the same: 15.5 and 10.1%. A couple highlights I saw in here. I wanted to take a look at some of the best and worst teams out there in terms of how they've drafted. The LA Kings come in as the top team percentage wise in drafting players who have played in at least 100 games or more over the 10 years. 16 players for the LA Kings. That's 25.8% against an average of 15.5. So they're trending way above the league average. For 200 plus games, it's actually the Columbus Blue Jackets coming in with 11 players, 16.9% for them, coming in, of course, yeah, about 6 points, a little over 6 points higher than the league average. Worst teams. Luckily, the Bruins are not on this list. And I'm going to give you two teams because Seattle does hit this metric. Again, kind of unfair. They've only played here, been in the league, 3 or 4 years now, only three drafts, I believe. But yeah, they've only had two players hit the 100 game mark, 5.5%, and only one player that's gone over 200 games that they drafted, 2.8%. So they are technically the lowest. But if we want to take a team that has drafted each of the 10 plus years, you got to go to the Pittsburgh Penguins. 7.6% at that 100 plus mark, only four players over the past 10 years. And they've only had two players drafted over the past 10 that have played 200 or more games. That's 3.8%. So, yeah, pretty ugly. Yep, we know it was right around that time they were winning championships and Sidney Crosby and all that kind of stuff. So they were not worried about the draft. They weren't worried about draft picks, but um, see where Pittsburgh is now definitely had an impact, right? So keeping in mind this 15.5 and this 10.1 number, let's review the Boston Bruins over these 10 seasons. 58 draft picks for the Bruins. Let me just double check that. It's um, 58 draftees, and they have had in that time 13 players play in at least 100 or more career NHL games. 22.4%. Yeah, just about 7 points higher than the league average. So listen, the next time you want to moan and groan about Don Sweeney and his drafting, and listen, I'm as guilty as you all on that too. Not bad. Okay, not we have to eat a little crow here, right? Not bad. When we look at the 200 plus games or more, we have had six players. That's at 10.1% or 10.3%. I'm sorry, on an average around the league at 10.1. So right there, kind of just a shade above league average. So how do we feel now looking at these numbers? Again, I know it's only one metric. I know it doesn't tell us the whole story. I know it doesn't fix 2015 for all of us. But I think what it tells us is we have held our own as an organization over the past 10 years. And that every team screws up, man. Every team misses. You think about it, only 15%, right? I mean, let's go back to that number. 2,186 players have been drafted, and To date, only 339 of them have reached the 100-game plateau in the NHL. That's a lot of misses. That's a lot of misses. Now, yes, we know as the 23 and 24 drafts, those players are all very young. Plenty of those guys will hit those numbers too. But yeah, does that make you feel any better if you're a Bruins fan? Does it make you feel maybe a little warmer, maybe a little softer when we look at Don Sweeney? I don't know. I know so many of us just want to focus on the negative and just want to be angry just to be angry. But I do think this data tells us that, and myself included, maybe I've been a little too critical, and maybe we have focused too much on the negative. Doesn't mean we forgive all the mistakes, but keep those numbers in mind, especially as we come into this draft here in June. Yeah, but thought it worthwhile study, and as I said earlier, wanted to give this my due diligence. Like I say, it's easy for someone to turn on a camera and just start spouting and throwing shots, but wanted to have a little bit more detail around it. Um, yeah, I think for myself, it does make me feel a little bit better. Yeah, we haven't won the cup, since 2011, and I'm still not going to give Sweeney credit for Bergeron and Krejci and Chara and Marchand and all that. Those were not guys he drafted, but over that time, he has done a good job of when they've had draft picks, of hitting on some. Again, think about Carlo, think about McAvoy, think about Lori. Jeremy Swayman was a fourth round selection. So a lot of nice wins in there too, guys. A lot of nice wins. So conference finals. Man, wasn't last night ugly? What an ugly game. I watched the first period. I crawled into bed with my kiddo and kept checking it as the night went on my phone and just man, I think if you're a Carolina fan, you've got to be disappointed. This thing's over, guys. I cannot see the Carolina Hurricanes winning 4 out of 5 against that Florida Panther team. I just can't. And for you Hurricane fans out there, man, I've picked against you all year, and then I finally pick you, and now you're losing. So you want to blame me for it? Go for it. But yes, I know you win one game. If you win game 3 down in Miami, you're right back in the series. But man, they've been outscored 10-2, and Florida's just punking them. Man, they're just they're playing Carolina's game. They're doing it better than Carolina is, and yeah, I think they're going back to a third cup. I hope I'm wrong. I am pulling for Carolina personally, but man, it's been impressive. I think even if you're not a Panther fan, you've got to say this is an impressive team that just doesn't stop. They're relentless. They're deep, and despite all these runs they've had, they continue to kind of bring that juice. And they're doing it against the best. They did it against Tampa, Toronto, now Carolina. Um, yeah, I hate to say it, but I think they're going to win a third straight East. Of course, tonight we have game 2, Dallas and Edmonton. That's game is going to start 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time from Dallas. Very impressed by the Stars in that last one. 3 power play goals in that third period. I do recall maybe Ben Stradamus over here. I did mention in my conference finals previews that special teams was going to play out, that Edmonton's PK was not very good, that they could be gotten to, and that if you're Dallas, you have to get to them. And boy, did they ever in that third period. So yeah, should be fun. I expect Edmonton to come out cooking tonight. I do feel like they probably tie this thing up going back to Edmonton tonight. Team with a lot of pride and I think probably a lot of anger, choking that lead away like they did, and just self-inflicted wounds with some of those penalties that they took. But should be a lot of fun. Hopefully, it's a more entertaining game than what we saw last night in Carolina. A couple other quick news and notes from around the league. Of course, a couple days ago, announced that Brendan Shanahan is not going to be renewed as a team president up there in Toronto. 11-year run coming to an end. Yeah, they can easily say, "Oh, we didn't renew his contract. He fired him." Fired. Kind of speculated this. Felt like this was probably the right time for that change to happen. It's just been more of the same for Toronto, and as good of a player Shanahan was, this thing was not getting any better. So we'll see where he ends up, if any place, and we'll see what direction Toronto goes. Huge job, obviously, and you got a good roster. You got a lot of good building blocks there. I'll be curious to see what they do. And we do have one more coaching vacancy off the board. The Chicago Blackhawks hiring Jeff Blashill as their next head coach. Of course, he has been on the bench there in Tampa Bay as an assistant. 7 years as a head coach, of course, going back to his time in Detroit. He has coached in 537 games, has a 204, 261, and 72 record. That's a 447 points percentage. Only five playoff games as a head coach, 1-4 in those games. Uh, Blackhawk fans, how you feeling? Is this the guy that's going to get the job done? Is he going to get Connor Bedard going? Is he going to get this team in the right direction? How you feeling about that hire? He was being interviewed, I know, by other clubs, so he was definitely a name that was kind of in that circuit. What the Blackhawks done now, that leaves us with three vacancies. Of course, the Pittsburgh Penguins, Seattle Kraken, and the Boston Bruins. There was an article yesterday at Boston.com, Boston Globe. Writer Connor Ryan, um, I'm just going to quote here. He said, speaking with Boston Herald Steve Conroy on Tuesday, Sweeney acknowledged that he was no longer waiting to speak with any other coaches still in the Stanley Cup playoffs. That could signal that Don Sweeney from Dallas is no longer in the running, although it's unclear if the Bruins have already reached out and had a conversation with the Stars' assistant. So it looks like Don Scoff is probably off the list. In that article, Pierre LeBrun was also quoted from his X account. He states, on Bruins coaching search, my understanding is final interviews will be conducted next week, and then a decision to come after that. Not sure who made the cut. Boston has talked to a lot of people: Marco Sturm, Jay Woodcroft, Mitch Love, Luke Richardson, Joe Sacco, Jay Leach, among those believed to have interviewed. That tweet, I'll say, was May 22nd, 2025 at 1:12 p.m. So that was going back to yesterday. So, yeah, at least we have some direction. We should have some sort of a decision by next week. For you Bruins fans, who do you want out of that list? Who do you want? I kind of like the idea of Marco Sturm. I kind of like the idea that I like the idea of Jay Leach, and I like the idea of Mitch Love. I think Mitch Love is a guy who might be one of those next up and comers, but see what happens, see how it goes. So that's what we have for you guys today. Again, happy Memorial Day weekend. I hope you all have a chance to spend some good time, some time away from work with family and friends, get around the barbecue. Hopefully, the rain will stop up here. But thank you all so much for watching and listening today. If you do like what you're hearing, please don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that little notification button too. Do appreciate it. And until next time, everybody, be kind, show love, and God bless.